Welcome back to A News. Now to the US and China trade relations. During the ASEAN summit, the US and China agreed a framework for a trade deal just days before President Donald Trump and Chinese President Xi Jinping are due to meet. The agreement was forged on the sidelines of the Association of Southeast Asian Nations summit in Malaysia on Sunday. US Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent said the agreement would remove the threat of the imposition of 100% tariffs on Chinese imports starting next month, and include a final deal on the sale of TikTok in the US. Here to help me understand this and what we might expect when the two leaders meet is political risk analyst Ross Feingold. Welcome.
Thank you.
My first question is, the US and China have made some headway in regards to this announcement, but might we see more when the two leaders meet in South Korea? And can we expect more details of the agreement along with the sale of the popular social media app?
I would expect there to be more details to be released either in the coming days or when the two leaders meet, keeping in mind what Secretary of the Treasury Bessent has shared publicly so far is very limited. And from the perspective of the United States, and specifically United States farmers, one of the big things they're waiting to hear is what are China's specific commitments with regard to the purchase of U.S. agricultural products, most notably soybeans, but other agricultural products as well. So there's definitely some more information that remains to be shared. And another aspect to keep in mind is members of the United States Congress are also going to be demanding details as well, not just Democrats, but even Republicans from President Trump's party as well, because many Republicans have been kind of skeptical of the TikTok deal because it would still keep the algorithm in the control of the Chinese company. So definitely more details need to be revealed about the scope of this agreement.
Definitely, and with alongside that, obviously China didn't want to pay 100% tariffs, I'm sure. Do you think there will be other deals that will be made when the two leaders meet as well?
Again, it's a wide relationship. There's so many different types of goods involved. And another aspect of this as well is services trade, because historically the United States has actually had a surplus in trade and services. We hear so much about trading goods in those container ships coming from factories in China to the United States. But the United States does export services like financial services to China, but there's a lot of non-tariff trade barriers, market entry restrictions, and things of that nature that United States and big U.S. companies have also been seeking a resolution and easier access to the market. So again, there's definitely many more details yet to be revealed, but it is possible that what they agree to will be a wider scope. It's not just going to be about TikTok. It's not just going to be about China's export of those rare earths or critical minerals. There's a number of other areas that it's very possible that they will announce something.
So there's been quite a bit of tension between these two countries, especially because China controls 90% of the refineries of rare earths. Who do you think has a stronger hand in these negotiations between the two leaders?
Yeah, there's so much discussion about that, and a lot of people assume that China has the upper hand. But as you mentioned, China doesn't want its goods to face 100% or higher tariffs on entering the United States. That would make them so uncompetitive, and Chinese manufacturers and exporters, they just wouldn't be able to sell product to the United States. That would cause a lot of problems for the Chinese economy, and manufacturers and people who work in factories might lose their jobs. Now, even though China's been trying to diversify its export markets, grow other markets like Europe or the Middle East or Africa, but the United States is still an important market. So the United States is not without leverage here, although people often just point to China's refining capability and its 90% market share for the rare earths refining or processing. But the United States is definitely not totally without leverage here.
And might we see more partnerships and deals, as you mentioned previously before, and in the sense of how much do these two countries need each other for economic growth?
That's really remains to be seen, because based on recent experience, even during the first 8 months of the second Trump administration, we're going back to that phase one trade deal in January of 2020 between the first Trump administration and China. The reality is that it seems very common for the two sides to reach a deal, but then things go wrong, and then each side starts taking retaliatory measures, whether that's raising tariffs, not buying certain products, as we've seen with China not buying U.S. agricultural products. So the trick here and the challenge is to implement faithfully whatever the two sides agree to. But again, it's clear that for a number of reasons, that's been a challenge in recent years.
And Trump is also due to meet with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. How do you think that meeting will go, and what could come out of that?
If this meeting really does go ahead, I would say it's a positive. Trump is going to get a lot of criticism for doing that. People say you met with him 3 times during your first term, no deal was made, and that's true. And that kind of just left things the way they were before. That unfortunately, North Korea continues to develop its missile and nuclear capabilities. It continues to find ways to evade sanctions. So Trump could meet with Kim. He cannot meet with Kim, and the reality is, North Korea is going to continue to engage in its nefarious activities. Is it likely that they'll reach a deal? Nah, they didn't reach a deal the first 3 times they met, so why would the 4th time reach a deal? But they might as well be talking. It's better than not talking.
And just going back to the ASEAN summit, we know that Trump was a mediator between Cambodia and Thailand. Now he is setting himself up as the peace negotiator in regards to bringing countries together. How important do you think that was on the global scale?
He's certainly developing a reputation for mediating disputes. To be fair to President Trump, he has done that successfully in a number of places. Now, there's a lot of debate about what role he actually played in these different agreements. And most notably, India vehemently objects to President Trump saying that he was the key man in bringing about a ceasefire between India and Pakistan earlier this year. But I think Trump deserves credit for putting the resources and reputation of his administration, sending special envoys or being directly involved himself. And he deserves credit for his willingness to do that. He could have simply said, this has nothing to do with me, nothing to do with the United States. Now, we know that President Trump has a goal here. He wants to win the Nobel Peace Prize. And frankly, if he does help negotiate a ceasefire between Ukraine and Russia, it would be really hard to deny him the Nobel Peace Prize next year.
Well, that actually moves quite nicely onto my next question in regards to Trump and meeting Xi Jinping, who is, Xi Jinping, obviously we know, is very close to President Putin over in Russia. Do you think that a conversation might happen in relation to the war in Ukraine? Could an outcome be helpful in regards to Trump speaking to the Chinese leader in regards to Ukraine to put pressure on Russia?
I think Trump might bring up the issue of China buying natural resources from Russia, which helps fund Russia's invasion and war of aggression against Ukraine. But would Trump ask Xi Jinping to put pressure on Putin to end the war? No, I don't think so. And that for a number of reasons. One, the Biden administration tried that multiple times, and that it just didn't work. Xi Jinping wasn't going to do that. And the Trump people know that. But also, Trump likes to say that he has a good relationship with Putin. He met with him in Alaska not long ago. There was talk in recent weeks of another meeting, possibly in Budapest, although now it seems to be on hold. But if Trump wants to be involved personally, then he could meet with Putin. He could call Putin, which he's done recently as well. He doesn't need the intervention of Xi Jinping. And frankly, that's kind of not really aligned with Trump's style anyway, to say, hey, Xi Jinping, I need your help negotiating with Putin. That's just not Trump's style.
It seems that China also wants to align in relation to making sure that he appeases to the US as well as his close ally, which is Russia. Why do you think that's important for China in regards to these talks that the leader will have with President Trump this week?
Trump and his team, they're very skeptical of multilateral organizations, whether that's the UN or the WHO, the WTO. and other ones. And Trump doesn't really like multilateral meetings, even though he's going to the ASEAN meeting and the APEC meeting on this trip. He really prefers one-on-one interaction. Now, China's taken a different approach. They're starting to say, we're the champion of multilateralism, a multipolar world. We love these multilateral organizations. We're going to give money to them, help them with the budget shortfall if the U.S. cuts back. And of course, they put their own people into leadership positions in these organizations. But the key thing here in answering your question is China wants to portray itself as a leader in a multipolar world. So that's being more involved in dispute settlement. For example, it's been involved in the Middle East. It tried to bring Hamas and the Palestinian Authority together. A couple of years ago, it brought Saudi Arabia and Iran back together, being involved in Myanmar. China is trying to position itself as a key global political player, not just an economic or a military power. And so they don't want to be left aside. If there is a deal to be reached between Russia and Ukraine, China might not be the mediator, which Trump is trying to be, but China would be one of the first countries to say to Ukraine, we're ready to buy your exports again. We want to buy your agricultural exports like we did previously. And they're not going to have second thoughts about Russia's reaction. So China will try to position itself as a friend to all.
Yes, and with that, obviously, China and Europe and coming together, their particular relationship, also within trade and its global position, how important is that relationship as well?
A lot of major European companies from different sectors, whether that's automotive or chemicals, fashion, luxury goods, they rely heavily on the Chinese market. And every time that politicians, whether that's national level politicians, members of parliament, foreign ministers, or at the European Union institutions criticize China, they get feedback from the corporate world who says, we can't blow up this relationship. We can't blow it up politically because it'll have an effect on our ability to do business and frankly make money in China. On the other hand, there are also politicians as well as businesses that are very concerned about the size of China's exports and their ability to manufacture cheaply and ship goods to Europe. This overcapacity issue in China, and Europe has been on the other side of that with lots of Chinese goods coming into Europe. There's concerns about China's extraordinary ability to manufacture electric vehicles, which is the challenge there for Europe is they support electric vehicles. They want to transition. And China's saying, we make them well and we make them cheaply. But then Europe says, well, wait a sec, we got to think about our own auto manufacturers. So there's a lot of give and take. And then there's the other political issues, which the Europeans, despite the concerns or the complaints of the corporate world, they do bring up. Things like human rights and religious freedom, Tibet, Xinjiang, Hong Kong, Taiwan. The European institutions often bring up these issues, and then the Chinese get very angry.
I think your connection just went. So thank you so much, Mr. Feingold. Thank you for joining me this evening. Thank you. After the break, we'll take a look at the key stories shaping the region. Stay tuned.